Hi, my name is Kruse, and my topic is communication in education. The average attention span is 10 to 15 minutes. With the average lecture length being about an hour, teachers are left with the difficult job of engaging their students in effective communication. This means that teachers must be extremely effective communicators and must have these three important skills. These skills include empathetic listening, mastery of their body language, and verbal feedback. Empathetic listening is by far one of the most important skills out of those three that a teacher can master. This is because empathetic listening helps build relationships, remove judgment, and uses verbal and non-verbal feedback in their communication. First off, building relationships. Teachers must be able to build their relationships with their students very well in order to get their message across. In a quote from Communication Centers in Oral Communication in Higher Education from Yook and Atkins, empathetic listening is used by peer educators at communication centers as they build relationships with the speaker. This is incredibly important in the field of education because they must be able to connect with their students if they want them to listen. Next is removing judgment. In another quote from Communication Centers in Oral Communication in Higher Education, this type of listening requires listeners to refrain from judgment. Refraining from judgment is incredibly important in the field of education because teachers must have an open mind towards their student and new ideas that they are presented with in the classroom. The final aspect of empathetic listening is verbal and nonverbal feedback. Once again, from Communication Centers in Oral Communication in Higher Education from Yook and Atkins, empathetic listening requires that listeners show, both verbally and non-verbally, that listening is taking place. If teachers do not demonstrate these aspects, students won't know this for sure, and might take this as a lack of interest or care for the subject at hand. While verbal communication is incredibly important through empathetic listening, the next portion is also very important. This is because body language is incredibly hard to master and control. Body language is made up of three main parts. It demonstrates interest, it is subtle, and it has specific behaviors that it can be attributed with. First off is demonstrating interest. In a quote from Communication Skills for Your Education degree, actions may signal a lack of interest and engagement or imply that you are not taking the seminar seriously. Even if you are not meaning these intents, you still might come across as having a lack of interest. That is why teachers must make a specific point to master their body language in education. The next portion is how subtle body language can be. In a quote from Discipline to Culturally Responsive Engagement from Pinto, nonverbal corrections and encouragement are much more subtle than verbal forms. In a classroom, interruptions are everything. So, you don't want to have to interrupt an entire class to send a small message to a student, when you could rather do it through a subtle nod or hand gesture. Finally, specific behaviors are addressed in Communication Skills for Education, from Bottomley and Maud. These include looking down or away when someone is talking, checking your phone, or sighing and tutting. These actions are incredibly disruptive to students, as they might take them as a lack of interest or care towards the subject, just as stated before. This would not go over well in a classroom, and many students would take it as an opportunity to check out and disengage. While nonverbal feedback is incredibly important, you must also be able to give verbal feedback in a classroom. This is because it can create a supportive environment. It can be easily misinterpreted, unfortunately, but it can also have significant effects through positive reinforcement. Starting off with the supportive environment it creates, in a quote from Effective Communication in the Classroom from Sword, it has been shown that positive feedback helps create a supportive environment and increase academic success. With the proper support through verbal encouragement, many students could see the benefits in their academics. Next is how easily it can be misinterpreted. In a quote from Discipline to Culturally Responsive Engagement from Pinto, The way you address your students could be misinterpreted if the student's culture is not congruent with the home life. This demonstrates the complexity of having a verbal conversation with any student or someone you might not know as well, because your words may be easily misinterpreted, making this a dangerous subject. The third point in verbal feedback is positive reinforcement. In a quote from Discipline to Culturally Responsive Engagement, when possible, ignore misbehavior and focus on positive reinforcement. When focusing on positive reinforcement, teachers create a culture of positive effects in their classroom, and they will see the benefits. While verbal feedback is incredibly important to education, it is useless without using all the skills in total. This includes empathetic listening, body language, and feedback. Students will get a deeper understanding of the message and have a more efficient and thriving classroom. Thank you.